button here. Okay, so now we're actually recording. So everybody wave at the camera. Smile. You never know, this might get out on YouTube. There might be some Hollywood director looking for new talent, and you may get discovered as a result of this video, right? So don't be self-conscious at all, but you know, just sit there and look happy. Okay, now let me share again. Okay. All right, guys, so let's just get on to the questions. I know some of these we've talked about a little bit, but I wanted to, it's got to keep coming together. You've got to, every time we look at this, you should know it just a little bit better. And ultimately, you're going to be writing about this, and you're going to be writing about his argument and your response to it. So we need to process, and we need to make sure that we fully get it. All right, so question number one. Do you think James McBride is writing about a real nightmare he had? Explain your answer. And I know we've gone over that a couple of times, but let me just say a couple of things. Number one, anytime it says explain your answer, what I'm asking for is more detail. Like, I expect you guys to always write incomplete sentences, but when it comes to your explanation, that's where you get to show off what you're thinking. Okay, it's not just about having the right answer, but it's about what is your thought process. That's what you're letting me know. How do you know it's a not a real dream, or not a real nightmare? Okay, other than the fact that I told you. What do you see in the text that makes you think it's not real? Okay, and then one other thing is, in the instructional video that I originally posted with this, I gave an answer to this question. And I basically said, this represents his biggest fear. Most of you had that, but some of you did not have that, and which tells me you didn't watch the video because I told the answer. So make sure you're always watching the instructional video, okay? All right, so as we said, this represents one of his fears, and of course it's a fear related to his daughter or one of his children. I mean, as a parent, those are the biggest fears that you have, is anything relating to something negative happening to your children. And so for him, the idea of his daughter, his precious daughter who he loves, coming home with a knucklehead with a thug attitude, that of course is really scary to him. This also functions as an anecdote to the article. An anecdote is a story, a short story that that makes a point, that reveals a point. And the point is number one is fear of hip hop, but also what he realized about his own hypocrisy. All right, so it's really setting up his first attitude, his initial attitude about hip hop, but it's kind of setting up the idea that it's going to change over time because he's dealing with his own hypocrisy. You know, we don't think he's going to get to the article and say, yeah, I'm just happy being a hypocrite like I've always been. And so no big deal. I hate rappers. No, we know he's not going to say anything like that. So it's really functioning to set up this change of heart he has. Okay, and I think I answered question 2 with that answer as well. Okay, so question 3, it says, what does McBride mean when he states there would be no Martin Luther King moments in our immediate future? And the part that everybody got right is that they weren't going to have a peaceful resolution to this. You know, the rappers and McBride and his buddy, they were going to fight, okay? There's more to it, though, than just the lack of peace. There's also the idea of these guys aren't going to get together. There's going to be no integration of the rappers and the jazz guys. Now, this leads me to something that was probably the most interesting thing in all the responses from both assignments. A lot of people in answering question 3 mentioned something about race, is that the white people and the black people were not going to have peace. And I just thought to myself, I said, where did they get the idea of white people? Because if you look, paragraph 3, it says it very clearly. There were no white people in the room. Okay, though I confess I wish there had been, if only to hide my own paleness of my own frightened face. We were Black and Latino students. So a lot of people were trying to make this a racial issue. Okay, so like I guess the jazz loving whites versus the Black rappers. And race wasn't an issue on this at all because they were all people of color. So I was kind of thinking to myself, why are people infusing race into this when the text clearly says there were no white people? And it wasn't just a few people, it was many, many students. So what I think this brings up is a core key point that we need to understand when we're doing critical reading. So the first phase of critical reading is just reading the author's message and trying to understand the author's message in its entirety without judgment, without bringing in any of our experience. Now, it's almost impossible to leave our worldview and our experience aside for a few moments while we're reading, but we got to try really hard to do that. Because let's just face it, in our society right now, racial tensions are as bad as they've been in a very long time. And because of media, because of social media, because of professional sports, because of all these high profile things that we see on computers, on TVs and whatever, we're just inundated with racial strife right now. And so what I think is happening is we're bringing that into our critical reading. We're bringing in our own life experience right now, our own worldview, our own backgrounds, and it's kind of informing us on, it's helping us interpret what James McBride is saying. However, we don't want to do that. We don't want to bring our interpretations into his message. We want to understand his message in its fullness. Now, at some point down the road, later this week or next week, you guys are going to be trying to figure out to what extent do you agree or disagree with James McBride. And at that point, then your opinion, your experience, your worldview comes back into play. So part one is we're just simply trying to understand in its fullness. And then we're going to evaluate, and then we're going to express our opinions. So your worldview matters, your experience matters, your own thoughts matter, but they don't matter at this phase right now. Right now, it's all about James McBride and what he is saying. Okay, so if this is not about race, then what is it about? And I'll probably develop this a little bit more later, but this is really a generational kind of thing. Notice in the nightmare, you know, he's the old guy and the rapper is the young guy. And he even says, I highlighted it here, it's no longer my world, it's his world. So there's a generational thing going on with this. All right, and we'll talk about the music a little bit more, what jazz represents, what rap represents, and why this is such a big thing to James McBride in particular. Okay. Any questions on that? If you have any questions, just speak up, because when I'm sharing my screen, I have a very limited view of the students. I can only see a few of you. So if anyone has a question, just speak up. Okay, we'll move on. All right, question 4, what point is McBride trying to make when he contrasts himself and the other journalism students with rappers who crashed the party? Okay, so again, I think this is old school values versus, you know, modern new school values. In traditional American value is, you know, go to school, get a good education, get a good job, and, you know, succeed. And part of the way you develop credibility as a young person is to go to school and get the college degree. Well, these guys were getting, these rappers were gaining their credibility based on something quite different than the standard American, you know, way of doing things. And that was through street rap, street performing at local venues. And so James McBride did everything right. He went to school, he got the degree, and he's ready to conquer the world, right? These guys, these rappers, did everything you're not supposed to do, you know? And who are the ones who are succeeding? Who are the ones telling the American story? You know, like just like this, he said, the real American storytellers of the American experience came from the world of the guy that Bill had just slapped. Okay, and they were all from the South Bronx. So that's what makes it particularly difficult for James McBride is he did everything right. He wants to be the storyteller, but he has to realize that he's not the one. It's these other guys. They don't have degrees, they don't have money, they don't have credibility, but they have talent. And that's where the jealousy part comes in. Uh, I think that they are doing what he wants to do, and they didn't go to school to do it. Interesting. All right, question 5. McBride says that rap held everything I wanted to leave behind. And then I said, in your opinion, what does rap represent that McBride wanted to leave behind? And if I had to do this assignment over again, I would have made this question pop up later, because when you get to the second half of the article, he starts explaining some of the negativities um, associated with the inner city life. And I think those are the things he's talking about. So we'll enter this one later on when we get to that section. But I think in general, what he's saying is, you know, he wanted to move on from that inner city life, and rap represented everything he wanted to leave behind, that old life that he was, in essence, trying to escape. Okay. And then finally, question 6, what was the real cost for McBride in ignoring rap for 26 years? Well, so the biggest thing is he just says it right here. He missed the most important cultural event of his lifetime. And you remember, he wanted to be one of the journalists, one of the storytellers. And so he is supposed to cover the big events. Not only did he miss a big event, he missed the biggest event of his lifetime. And in doing that for 26 years, guess what? There's no way of going back. So I think there's a lot of regret in that statement. Now, just to give you kind of a silly small example of that, is a couple of years ago, Tom Petty, the rock star, the guy was playing at the Hollywood Bowl, and I said to my wife, I go, hey, we should go see Tom Petty at the Hollywood Bowl. That will be fun. Well, it was on a school night. I didn't want to be out late and get up for work early the next morning and all that stuff. So I just kind of talked myself out of wanting to go see it. And then I'm not even kidding, like a week or two later, Tom Petty died, right? And I just thought that the death itself is tragic on a whole level all by itself. But I just remember thinking, why didn't I just go to the concert? And now that's something I'll never get to do. Now, that's not a big life regret for me. I mean, it's just a concert and it's really not that big of a deal. But take that and apply it to what James McBride is saying. He's wanting to change the world and he's wanting to cover all the big events, and he missed the most important one of his lifetime, and he'll never get that opportunity again. He'll never have the opportunity to cover rap in its early days. And he was right there. There's a point in the article where he talks about walking past these guys performing in the streets, and he was right there and he just missed it. He had such a prejudice against it that it would not allow him to see what was happening right before his eyes. And what makes it worse for a journalist is that's his job, right? He was supposed to be trained to see that stuff and cover it. And so he blew it personally and he blew it professionally. Actually, I should do it this way. He blew it personally and he blew it professionally as well. So that's what makes it particularly bad. All right. Let's move back to move on to hip hop 2. All right, question 7. All right, what is the point of the comparison between hip hop and the Beatles and Elvis? In other words, what does hip hop have in common with the Beatles and Elvis? And what makes me laugh on this question, I mean, I wrote the question, so I'm laughing at my own question. But what makes me laugh is what the Beatles and Elvis Presley are to, modern day society. We look back with nostalgia on Elvis Presley and the Beatles, and we think, oh, well, that brings us back to like a simpler time, a more innocent time, especially with Elvis Presley. So, anyway, Elvis and the Beatles were controversial, really big time controversial in their day. I went and watched an old news clip of some guy evaluating Elvis Presley when he was young, when he was just starting to gain popularity. And the guy said he's young, he appears to be disrespectful, and the way he moves, the way he dances and moves his hips, it's actually vulgar. That was the word the guy used, vulgar, to describe the way Elvis Presley moved. And he says Elvis has never had to work very hard. He got popular without the hard work. And I don't think it's going to last. He goes, I predict that Elvis Presley's popularity is just going to die out very soon. Well, number one, he was wrong. And in fact, Elvis Presley's nickname was the King, right? That just shows you how iconic he really was. Beatles the same way. When they hit America and Beatlemania started, the youth culture was going nuts with the Beatles, and you just see these old this old video footage of the Beatles and their concerts, and girls screaming and fainting, and guys almost doing the same thing. They had long hair. Some of their answers were a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? They were kind of popping off to the media when they were answering questions. And so they seemed disrespectful as well. So these guys were the rebels of their day, like the rappers would be considered the rebels of our day. And so that's the point of comparison. They were rebels who were seen as a negative influence on society. Okay, looking at question 8, it's the one about the moorings. And it says, when McBride writes, hip hop has ripped popular music from its moorings in every society it has permeated. Let's go into that in a little bit more detail. Okay, it starts with this sentence right here. This defiant culture of song, graffiti, and dance collectively known as hip hop. So one thing it's important to note, and this is what the distinction that McBride is making, it's not just music, it's a lifestyle. Right? It includes song, and we know what a huge influence music is for people in general. But it's the song, it's the graffiti, and it's the dance. And he could have thrown in fashion, and he could have thrown in a lot of other things as well. But he's talking about the entire culture that surrounds, that goes along with hip hop. And so that has ripped popular music from its moorings in every society. So every society has its own style of music that they take a lot of pride in. So like for me, people of my generation, maybe rock music was the big music that really helped define who we were as kids and teenagers, and moving forward, we still love it, right? So so basically hip hop has come in and it's like taken rock from its secure place. It's strong influence, its popularity. It's kind of taken it away from that. Just like if a boat became undocked from the mooring, it would just kind of float aimlessly. Well, rap music has come in and overthrown that and replaced it. All right, now that's one example in American culture, but look at the one he gives. In Brazil, rap rivals samba in popularity. Now, I'm not into samba music, but I assume from this sentence that Brazil takes a lot of pride in its samba music. Well, rap is changing that. And then he brings in another aspect of the lifestyle, China. Teens are spray painting graffiti on the Great Wall of China. So in a society where strict obedience to the law is really important, these guys are spray painting on the Great Wall. And in France, it has been blamed for the worst civil unrest seen in decades. So rap is moving in, and it's not just that people are listening to it, but it's throwing society on its ear. It's changing things up. It's rattling the system. That's what he's talking about with that. All right, question 7. What is the point of comparison between, oh no, sorry, I read that one. Okay, let's move on to question 9. What are the 3 conditions McBride credits for the production of hip hop? All right, so it's right here in this paragraph. Number 1, 40% of New York City's black males are jobless, so you have a high unemployment rate. 1 in 3 black males will end up in prison, so a disproportionate percentage of black males will end up in prison. And then finally, the life expectancy of a black male in the United States ranks below that of Sri Lanka and Colombia. So things are so difficult for black men in the United States that they're dying early. Their life expectancy is lower than some of these third world countries. All right, so you take all that together, what McBride is saying is that as long as these conditions continue to exist, you're going to continue to have rappers singing about this stuff. And you're going to continue to have the calls for change and social justice and the anger that's coming about as a result of these things as well. Now, back to our earlier question that I said I should have done later in the article. What are some of the things that rap represents that McBride leaves behind? I think this is a pretty good list. As a young black man growing up in the inner city, you know, why wouldn't he want to leave this behind? These are some of the things that he's talking about. Okay, and then finally, question 10 and 11, we have the part about hip hop that he struggles to embrace, and then the part about hip hop that he willingly embraces. All right, so this is interesting. Let's read this. That is why after 26 years, I've come to embrace this music I tried so hard to ignore. So we see that change of heart that the original story, the nightmare story, hinted at. So he's embracing it. But then he says, hip hop culture is not mine. So it's like the culture of the new generation, not him and the old guys and their generation. He says, yet he owns it. So he embraces it. He's not trying to leave it behind anymore. And look at this, much of it I hate. So there's still a lot about it that he doesn't like, yet I love it, the good of it. So he still understands the negatives, but he's saying, look, it produces some good as well. All right, so one of the negatives that he has a hard part embracing is the violence, right? Just the whole violent, and I don't think it's only talking about like fighting and beating people up. It's some of the relationships that it mentions, especially the treatment of women, feels violent, you know. But then he says, but here's the good of it. At its best, hip hop lays bare the empty moral cupboard that is our generation's legacy. So when he says our generation's legacy, he's really not talking about you guys. He's talking about people like me, because he's older than I am, but I'm a lot closer in age to him. And what he's saying is that our legacy, our generation's legacy, is morally bankrupt. And really, morality has to do with, the rightness and wrongness. And a moral person will understand the difference between right and wrong, and they'll choose the right, right? And so what I think he's getting at here is our moral cupboard, our generation, our moral cupboard is empty. In other words, we just fail to see what's right and what's wrong. And I think what he's getting at is, our generation, we've been seeing these problems for a long time. These problems have been in existence for decades. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. We're not bad, but we're not doing anything positive either. I think that's what he's getting at here. And that's this generation's legacy. And because his generation, and by extension, my generation, hasn't done its part, your generation, the generation that produces this music, is speaking out. They're angry. They want change. That's kind of what he's getting at there. And then he says this music that once made visible the inner culture of America's greatest social problem, its legacy of slavery, has taken the dream deferred to a global scale. What that idea of the dream deferred means is that in McBride's opinion, not everybody has really true access to live the American dream. The idea where you can just go out through your own merit and your own hard work, achieve anything you want to achieve. And I think what he's getting at is for African Americans in these communities, that dream is deferred. It's like you can't pursue it yet. Maybe someday you can, but you can't pursue it yet. It's deferred. I think that's what he's getting at with that. Okay, guys. Now, I fully understand that some of the things that he says in this article may be controversial. But again, our goal right now is to not agree or disagree, but it's just to fully understand. And in order to fully understand, we have to, sometimes go into uncomfortable places. But as we move forward now, you guys will a lot more start evaluating his argument and getting to choose what you think about it. All right, guys. As I said earlier, there's no new assignment today. Like there's no written assignment for you guys to, turn back in. As soon as I can figure out how to post this article, I'll post the article, and I need you guys to read it beginning to end before Wednesday's class. Wednesday, we'll spend our 30 minutes trying to go over, what is the main idea of the article. And then after that, on Thursday, we'll start working towards to what extent do you agree or disagree and all that good stuff. So we're getting dangerously close to the big writing project on this assignment. Okay, before I let you guys go, does anybody have any questions? Okay, and if something comes up, this class has been recorded, I'll post it, and you can always fast forward the video to get to the part where you have questions. And of course, as always, you guys are able to email me, and I'm very happy to get back to you. Okay, if you have any questions, you can stay behind. If not, you guys are free to go. And I hope you have a most excellent afternoon.
Bye.
See you later.
Mr. Homer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joseph.
So on the assignment of the hip hop part 2, I finished it, but I don't think I submitted it into the Canvas assignment, and the assignment is closed now. Will you still be able to view it? Because I shared it with you.
Yeah, you know what I want you to do though, is, and I think I might have seen where you shared that, but I want everything to go through Canvas. So I'll unlock it for you just till the end of the day. And that way you can get on and you can submit it through Canvas.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Mr. Homer, did you get me for?
I think so.
Did you put me for, or am I absent on the?
No, you know what? I think sometimes there's just a delay, from people hearing me and then me hearing people. And I think that Yeah, so I got you. I didn't mark you absent.
Oh, okay, okay.